Hi guys, welcome back to After Hours with me, Jimmy Thistle. I'm hoping you've had a listen to the first two episodes, had some amazing feedback, and today we are talking to Kate Turner. Now I've known Kate a couple of years on Instagram, but this was the first time we kind of actually spoke, and it was just a fascinating chat. I found out some really interesting things about her childhood, some of the traumas that she faced, and why she reckons that kind of led her into more of a grey area binge drinking situation than my previous two guests. Kate is still in early days of recovery, if you want to call it recovery. But it's an interesting conversation, as grey area drinking, as long as alcohol is having a negative impact on your life and the behaviors that come with it, then there's an issue there. So you don't have to be, a raging, for want of a better word, alcoholic like myself. But as long as it's having a negative impact on your life, then it's worthwhile having a conversation with yourself about, giving it up. Because as I know, if there is an issue with it in your life, it only gets worse. It doesn't just kind of plateau or get better. It always gets worse. So, buckle up, have a listen, and, follow my pages, follow my Spotify and my Apple Podcasts. Those are the only two really that I'm on now. I don't really see the point in being on all and sundry. If there are people out there that are using Amazon or whatever, and they would like to see the show on there, then give me a shout and I'll have a look at uploading that. But at this moment, it's Spotify where it's hosted and Apple Podcasts. So yeah. Sit back, have a listen, follow my pages, and leave me a review. And the 5-star rating can always help bump me up the lists so that more people can listen to these podcasts. But thank you for listening.
Hello. No, I was worried about it because I don't know what it is like with you guys. It's been absolutely horrendous here. They made like a national, what do they call it? A major incident on the island.
Yes.
And my internet connection can be a bit dodgy when there's like a breeze blowing in the trees. So
Yes.
hopefully we'll be okay. And I'm on record now. So yeah. So what I wanted to just go into, because you're obviously the last two episodes I've had people that have been 3 years sober, 10 years sober. Tell us how many days sober you are today, if you've got that count to hand.
So I had to check because I haven't checked for a few days. I am 145 days.
Yeah, I was thinking it was about 140,
Yeah.
That is amazing, Kate. Well done on you.
Thank you.
And so, do you want to kind of maybe go back, tell us a bit about yourself, and then when you started drinking, and I suppose when you kind of thought that it was an issue.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. So
okay.
yeah, I'm Kate. I'm from London. I'm from Harrow. I'm now in the Peak District. So yeah, I've moved quite far away from where I was born. I'll go into that later. But yeah, I've got 3 boys and a dog. I'm a co-parent, so I left my marriage in 2019.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's pretty tough, to be honest. Being a mum to 3 boys
Yeah.
and being on my own is pretty hardcore.
I can
But
imagine. I can imagine. 3 boys. What are their ages?
12, I have to think. Wait, 12, 9, and 7. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So all. Yeah. That's kind of. I'm not a parent myself, but but kind of a stepfather, and so they're quite similar ages. So it's all that kind of trying to work out what they need and what they want. Do you know what I mean? Because some are still into playing games, and then some are entering like kind of young adulthood, and
Yeah,
that, and
exactly.
obviously the issues that come
Yeah,
with that.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Like Harvey, my eldest, has just started high school, so you've got all the issues with that. He's got a phone now, so you've got to like sort of like monitor what he's watching, and yeah, it's tough, and they're all into sports, so I spend my weekends at rugby pitches and football pitches.
Okay, well I mean that is good that they're into sport. I mean with me, I was never really into sport at all. I mean, I think the only sport that I like as an adult is probably tennis, but even then it's only really Wimbledon. So like for what is it, 2 weeks of the year, I watch Wimbledon, but I've never been into sport, into football or rugby or anything. So maybe that's kind of where I kind of went down the kind of grungy, just listening to music all the time and hanging about with my mates, and then kind of falling into, oh, I'm not going to say a bad crowd because we were our own worst enemies, if that makes sense. So yeah, so when did you kind of start drinking?
So my first ever drink was at a family party when I was about 11.
Right.
This sounds weird, but my uncle gave me some port and lemonade. And I remember how nice it felt. It felt so lovely, and I felt all warm and like happy. It was, I
Yeah.
can actually remember where I was sat. I can actually picture the scene. So that was my first ever drink. And then I started drinking down the park at about 13, 14.
That
I,
seems to be the kind of key age for a
yeah,
lot of people. Yeah, 13,
yeah.
14, which is worrying because I mean, as I say, did you say you've got a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, and uh,
Well, 9 and 7, but
sorry,
that's
12, but it's not far off, is it?
yeah, Harvey's a year younger than when that to get my head around that's meant like the idea of him drinking next year.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I think to myself, oh well, we were older teenagers then, but that's not true. Like it's really not. I mean, I had a bit of stubble, and I was about 6 foot when I was 14, so I could go in the shop and get alcohol for us. Like sometimes we'd have to, kind of accost passers-by and ask them if they'd go in. There's no way I would go in a shop for a 14-year-old nowadays. So I don't know whether times were different back. Well, times were different back there, but we still looked 14. We weren't kind of suddenly looking like 18, 19-year-olds.
Yeah, it is mental, isn't it? Like we used to so around Christmas, I can remember this very clearly. We used to go around, so there was a few of us that were good singers. I was probably all right, but I had this mate called Abby who could really sing. So we used to put her at the front, and we used to go carol singing for beer money. And we'd get like a £5, and then like you would go wait outside Waitrose,
Yeah.
and then get someone to buy us some whatever it was, like Mary Down, or do you remember 2020?
So MD 2020 was our thing that we could only get it in like the city centre, so you'd have to put an order in with someone, and it was only really for special occasions that was like the cream of the crop. So I think I
Yeah.
remember getting a bottle of orange MD 2020 for bonfire night. I must have been about 15, and it was like it was so easy to drink though. And I remember I finished mine, and my other friend he wasn't really enjoying it. I don't know what was going on. So I finished half of his as well. So I was absolutely flying. It was just, but how we were, I mean, it's funny you mentioned Mary down there. I do remember we were stood outside the shop in our village, and I went over to this guy who was like suited and booted. He'd obviously maybe just coming back from work or wherever he was going. We handed over like our coins to him to get us this bottle of Mary down. And he came out the shop, and he must have been in his 20s. And he came out the shop, and he was like, "Oh, they must have thought that was really funny, me buying a bottle of champagne and a bottle of Mary down." So he was going around to his girlfriend's house or something, and he was maybe even going to pop the question, who knows? But he bought
Oh,
this expensive champagne and a bottle of Mary down. So they
that's
must have they must have known why and
yeah.
what we were kind of doing with it. But yeah, so what how did your drinking kind of I don't want to say that you the words escalate, but maybe it did through your kind of 20s, and did how did that get on?
So I mean, I've always been the one that takes it too far. I've always been, the one that will be the last woman standing as such.
Yeah.
I started doing drugs about 14, 15. I did speed. For the first time at 14 and had a massive panic attack in a park, and the police had to call an ambulance, and I was taken to hospital, and my parents had to come at like 2 a.m.
And were they aware of what you'd been doing and what you'd been taking?
Yeah. So that was that was the first time I did drugs, but I used to drink every weekend during my teen years. I've made some notes down here, so one sec.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I've got like my teen years on a big A3 sheet. But yeah, I've got very low self-worth. I've always had it. I've had quite a traumatic childhood. So I think because I felt so crap in myself, I used to numb it with alcohol.
Okay. And
yeah.
I mean, I don't want to pry, but is that anything that you're kind of willing to talk about?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. That's fine. So I grew up in South Harrow with my mum and my dad. I didn't have any siblings. My parents were addicts, both of them, heroin and methadone.
Oh, wow, right.
My mum and my dad were using when I was born. I think I'm sure my mum didn't use while she was pregnant with me, but they injected heroin for 12 years in total.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you didn't have any of that. I don't know the exact word, but is it postnatal addiction or postnatal withdrawal when you were born? I think you said that your mother wasn't using, but there was none of that with you when you were born.
No, do you know what? I've never asked that because I don't think you can just stop using heroin, can you? So mum would have had to have, I don't know.
Detox.
Yeah, I need to speak to my dad about that.
You can get some, I believe there's some babies that are being born with postnatal withdrawal from alcohol as well. Because the minute they're born, they are not getting that intake that their mother has been, so then they have to go through a certain form of withdrawal. So it's not just things like heroin and cocaine. It can be from alcohol as well.
I'm going to ask my dad that because I don't know. That's something that I've never even thought about. But yeah, so they were using up until I was about 6. Right. I don't remember much of that time. I think I've blacked it out. There's certain, like when you think back to your childhood and you can remember certain things.
Yeah.
I can remember waking up and them not being there. So they used to go and score. And because my dad kept falling out with all the dealers, my mum would have to go because she's a really good people person.
Yeah.
So there was occasions when they did leave me. And I do remember once waking up and completely panicking because I must have been 3 or 4. I can't remember, it's so long ago.
Sure.
And then the other pinnacle moment I remember is the police coming to school because Dad, his dealer was part of a big drug network, and the police were trying to get this guy, and they followed Dad when he scored. They followed him once from him scoring, and they raided my house, and found all the equipment, and then took my mum and dad in, and then the police came to school. So I can remember that.
Right. Okay.
But you know what? My mum and dad are old hippies. I don't want to say typical junkies because that's awful, but my dad worked. He was a highly functioning addict. He held down. He's a gardener. My dad's a gardener.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's always been a gardener. In fact, he used to be a gardener before he started his own business. He worked at Harrow School. Do you know the school?
Yeah.
Harrow on the Hill.
And the thing is, sorry, I'm just gonna go to say a little thing. You're saying they're not the typical junkies. Like, the thing is, I don't have any real experience with heroin. The only experience I have is there's a few people in the meetings that I used to go to because I used to go to NA. So there was a number of people in there that were ex-heroin addicts. So I've never been, face to face with it, apart from maybe someone walking down the street in a city centre, but I have no idea whether they are or not. So my knowledge of that is only from, I guess, for want of a better kind of example, like films and things, yeah, and books, from Train Spotting, things like that. So what we have in our head of the traditional junkie is what we're seeing on film. And I know from my research that that is not that is not your typical addict. If someone has money and their ability to kind of not let it completely get the better of them, if that makes sense. Like if your dad was still holding down a job, then obviously he was managing it, and there are probably like a large percentage of heroin addicts that are able to do that. They're still having it completely control them, but they're still a little bit in control. I'm probably rambling a bit now, but what I wanted to say is, like, when I got, from the majority of my life, my alcohol was, I was a functioning alcoholic. I was able to keep down a job. It got worse as it got on. So that's the kind of the crux
Yeah.
of it. These things never get
Yeah.
any better. Are both your parents still with us then? Yeah.
So my mum passed away 2014.
Sorry to hear that.
My dad's still with us. He's my rock.
Right.
He's an awesome guy. I love the bones of him. He's amazing. And yeah, I really miss my mum. But she was very poorly. So, but yeah, just going back to that though. So they got clean. So my
Right.
parents got clean, which is fucking amazing.
At the same time, or?
So the pinnacle of they're using was, I'll just tell this story very quickly. So my mum was from a very upper class family, and my dad was from a single parent, like working class family.
Mm-hmm.
Got together. They started. Well, it started with acid, and then it got heavier, and they got into heroin. So my mum's dad hated my dad because he was working class and he was an addict. So anyway, so mum promised her dad many times, we're going to get clean, we're going to get clean. Anyway, they lied to him and said, yeah, we've got clean. And he was like, right, I'll pay for your first family holiday to Magaluf. Mm-hmm. So I can actually vaguely, I think I was about 5 or 6. Anyway, so we flew to Magaluf. They did all the rest of their heroin at the airport.
Wow.
Got to Magaluf and just drank gin the whole time, right? They were obviously in a mess because they didn't have heroin. Then they decided, right, we're going to go home. We've got to go home and score. So got to the airport, managed to convince the airline to fly us home early because mum's diabetic. She made up some story that I'm not well. Mm-hmm. But they flew them to Manchester, not London. They got on the milk train back to London, got their dealer, who was called Stony Tony, to pick them up from King's Cross to go and score. Uh-huh. And I think that, and Dad said it was absolutely awful. He never felt so bad. So I think that was the turning point for them. Yeah. So then I can't remember what happened exactly, but they got offered treatment. I don't know if you've heard of Broadway Lodge.
Do you know what? That rings a bell. Is that in London as well?
It's in Somerset.
Right, okay. No.
So it's a treatment centre. So mum went first for 4 or 5 weeks, and then came home, and then Dad went. And they found the fellowship, they found NA, mm-hmm. and then they were in NA. Well, Dad's been in NA for 35 years.
Wow. So how old were they roughly about that when that happened?
Well, I was 6, like late 20s.
Oh wow, okay, yeah. So young, and you were saying they'd done it for about 15 years, so mid-teens to yeah. Wow.
And then and then my life then was family meetings in North London. So we'd go to Swiss Cottage, we'd go to Hampstead Heath, and we'd go 3 or 4 times a week. And
to the fellowship meetings, yeah.
So I effectively grew up in NA.
Wow, that's I had no idea of this. So wow, that's fascinating.
So I find like it's got its pros and its cons. So pros is it's made me massively like an empath because I heard so many stories.
Yeah.
And I probably heard things that I shouldn't have heard. That's probably the flip side. But I feel like it's made me understand people maybe a bit better. I don't know.
And so, because this is the thing, so I guess, you know, I used to smoke, and all of my group of friends smoked at the time, apart from one guy, and his parents smoked, but ours didn't. So I kind of, you know, I know that's kind of cut and dry, it's black and white, but to me it was like, oh, well, I guess because my parents didn't smoke, my friends' parents didn't smoke, we're kind of rebelling against that. So we're going to smoke, and then he's rebelling against his parents, so he's not going to smoke. I don't know, but like with you growing up with that, you know, kind of so close to addiction and the knowledge of addiction, you know, did that not, were your parents not, oh, you shouldn't drink or you shouldn't, you know, do drugs? How was your mum when she had to get you from hospital after like kind of almost overdosing on speed?
They've always been pretty laid back, to be
Yeah.
honest. My friends loved my folks because they were the ones that would let us drink at their house.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
I think they felt like I was probably going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
From their youth, they probably would have been like, well, look at us, like she's going to do it anyway. But why didn't we let her do it? But we know she's doing it, and we know where she's going to be. So they were always really cool.
And I guess you can kind of monitor it if you're doing it in their house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I did still go out and get wasted.
Yeah.
And they didn't. But yeah. Yeah. They're really spiritual, my mum and dad. They're cool. Like we were so close, you know, we were such a close family.
Yeah, they sound like lovely people. You know, I'm just sorry that you've lost your mum so early as well. And so what was did that kind of incident with the speed put you off of that?
No. No. I am a party. I was always a party animal. You know, I was always the one that would be at the after party.
And as you say, last woman standing. I mean, I completely kind of you know, I was kind of the similar one, and it was, I suppose, speed came in around 14, 15. Then it was kind of microdots, acids, and I always said to myself, I'm never going to do ecstasy, because this was around the time of Leah Betts, and it was like, oh my God, that's going to kill you. You know, there was no indication of alcohol, you know, causing my little brain to be, you know, mushed, and it was possibility of killing me as well. I did eventually start taking ecstasy because I would go to like clubs and raves, and but I never did. Well, I did cocaine, but I never did heroin, and I think that was kind of the one. Well, I guess it was saving grace, but I always said to myself, well, I'll never do that. But you know what? Like, I think I was very lucky that I wasn't in a position or a situation where it was offered to me, because that's the thing where if I was drunk or high or whatever, who knows what I'd have done. And you know, your inhibitions are down when you know you're drinking and doing all that.
Well, I think heroin wasn't the drug of choice when, I mean, I don't know how old you are, Jimmy.
45 in 2 weeks.
Oh, so you're kind of my age then. I'm 43.
Okay, so so similar era, yeah.
We're 80s babies, aren't
80s babies, and the 90s. I'll go on to the 90s in a minute. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So I just think like heroin was more like the 80s, wasn't it? Like, I think like in the 90s, it was all like ecstasy, coke, speed, wasn't it? Like I never came across heroin, and I'm sure it was there, but it wasn't a party drug, was it?
Wasn't a party drug, still isn't. I mean, as far as I know, the heroin pretty much puts you to sleep. As far as you just nod out. So
So, I mean, I've never had any desire to try it. I've never been offered it. I was all about the party drugs. That was my.
So the 90s, I mean, for me, it was, so the music was a big part of my life, and, you know, all of my kind of icons, heroes, as it were like, you know, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, John Lennon, you know, I mean, all the classics, but I was so kind of steeped in that. It wasn't just the music for me, it was the whole culture, and it was like that whole Like I really liked the kind of seediness of it, the dirtiness
I
of
mean,
it,
it was a
and
movement, it wasn't it? It was a movement, and
yeah.
it shaped our teenage years, right? I mean, I liked all those artists as well. I was probably a bit more sort of Oasis and.
Well, sorry, yeah, I mean I'm seeing lots of bands that were from like the
I did,
60s,
I did
but
like those guys as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then Oasis and Blur and Pulp and all of them come in. But we had that whole Britpop culture of lads
Yeah.
and ladettes
Yeah.
and
And that all came. And then, women were seen as equal to men in terms of drinking. Like, I
yeah,
could drink most men under the table. Like,
yeah.
I could drink 15 drinks some nights.
But the thing is, and this is not me being sexist, the kind of medical science behind it shows that women drinking pint for pint with men is so much worse for you because just the kind of makeup of your biology. And it's but in the 90s you were like, Chris Evans on what was it, TFI Friday, which I loved that show, but it was he hosted it from a bar.
I know.
It was that whole culture. So we had no that was our like you come on, I think that was on at 6 o'clock on a Friday, so you'd just be having your
Yeah.
dinner and then you're seeing people in a pub, and it's like, of course, that was the whole mentality that we kind of grew up with. I know we all did it to ourselves, and I've only got myself to blame, but I find it quite difficult that you know I think a lot of people that are in their 40s and 50s now are still going out and living that lifestyle, and I'm just glad I'm out of it. No harm to them. If they want to crack on and do that, then please do. But I just think it's so damaging to our health now that when once you get to this age, everyone is about what we eat, and I'm not going to have processed foods, and I want to have a little bit more plant-based, and that's great, and I'm doing that. But then they go and absolutely downs it all with alcohol, which is pure poison.
Yeah. And I find Coke really popular in our age group still.
Yeah.
And they're like in Waitrose buying their organic bananas, but then they're out on Friday snorting lines off like toilet seats in seedy bars.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, balance maybe, but whatever, like that's mental. Like, I mean, I've always used Coke up until a few years ago, really.
Yeah. It wasn't, I mean, for me, I guess I didn't really have a lot of money, and when I did, I would maybe buy Coke. But for me, it never became a problem. I never got to a point where I was like, oh my God, I've just spent like £200 this weekend on Coke. It was like, a bag here, a bag there.
Yeah,
And
I'm the
it was
same.
gone.
Yeah,
But the heart related problems for people our age is insane. And it's like when I hear about people going out, oh yeah, I went and done like, 3 or 4 bags this weekend, and it's like, holy shit, like you should really look into this. And I know I'm sounding like an old fuddy duddy and like, oh, like a party pooper and all that, but it's true. Like we're not 20 anymore. And like one of the things I was going to ask you is like I wouldn't. I don't think I've got any regrets. Do you know what I mean? And the drinking and the drug taking and all of that throughout my life. Would I go back and change it? I don't think I would, because I wouldn't be the same person. I'd be a vision of who I am now, but it wouldn't be me right here, right now, if that makes sense, because of those experiences. I'm glad I got sober when I did, because I remember sitting in the meetings in the first couple of months thinking, wow, like what if because I'd see people that were like in their 50s or 60s coming in, and they were just getting sober, and I thought, wow, do you know what I mean? Like I'm still youngish, if I think. I'm not saying that 15, 60 is old, but it's older than I am. So I'm
yeah.
so glad that I still have this chance to live a sober life, if that makes sense. So would you, well, we'll go into that question later. Sorry. Let's find out about when you started thinking that alcohol might have been an issue. I mean, I know you said you were the party girl, but like the 90s and the early noughties, in our 20s and 30s, it wasn't really an issue, was it, to be out every weekend?
I mean, I've never drunk every day. Like there has been times when I have drunk every day, like lockdown, for example. But I was always a binge drinker.
Right.
I am at heart a homebody. Like I love being at home, but I equally love going out. Well, I used to love going out and getting wasted, but I wouldn't do it all the time. I'd do it probably once a week. But when I was a student, it was different. I probably did it 3 or 4 times a week. But I was a grey area drinker. I think, that where we weren't like, I wouldn't class myself as an addict, or maybe I was, or I don't know.
No, because you're not dependent on it. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, grey area drinking is that if it's causing a negative impact on your life, then there's an issue there. But I think, and I hate the word alcoholic now. I mean, I used to have to sit in a room and say, my name's Jimmy and I'm an alcoholic. I hate that, because at that point I wasn't. I was an alcoholic in recovery. To me, an alcoholic is someone that is dependent on it. So, grey area drinkers should and shouldn't call themselves alcoholics, because they're not, but you can still have an issue with alcohol if you're.
Exactly. And I had a massive issue because I have quite a few struggles with my mental health. I always have done. Probably that lies with my childhood trauma. I was also really badly bullied when I lived in London, which caused us to move out of London. We moved to Hertfordshire. So I think my childhood trauma, really, I carried that with me. I carried it throughout my teen years, my 20s, and I probably still carry it now, actually. But yeah, I have always been a blackout drinker. So I'll drink till I just pass out. And that's not good, is it?
And do you think you were doing that? You were doing that kind of in your 20s and 30s as well? Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. I used to think that when someone said, "Oh, I was in a blackout," I used to think that meant passing out, but it doesn't. It means that you're completely functioning, completely pissed, but you just stop remembering it. So you've just completely don't have any recollection of what you've done. And I was doing that. I was probably doing that from my late teens. You know what I mean? There was lots of times when I blacked out.
I can tell you so many stories. I used to fall asleep in bus stops, car parks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny now.
It is, but then but the thinking back, like, how did we not? How did anything not happen to us?
Yeah, how are we still alive, Jimmy? I mean,
like, you're talking about London, Hertfordshire. I was in Glasgow, and I'd go and visit friends in other cities like Aberdeen and Manchester, and I'd do the same there. And I'd meet up with random people in pubs and stuff. And just the thing is, I'm very trusting. I'm a very trusting person, and I think I'm just so lucky that I didn't fall foul of anyone back in those days. So yeah.
Well, we're still here.
We're still here, and we're kind of
sober.
Sober, spreading the word. And so, because I remember, I think you kind of came on to Instagram, or you kind of showed up around my Instagram maybe about 2 years ago.
Yeah, so I had a really bad experience 2 years ago. So I went to a party, my friend Kellyanne's husband's 40th. Now, Kellyanne is also on the sober journey, so she's great. She's one of my really good friends. Her husband had a barbecue, and me and the boys went, and I drove, because I was like, I'm not going to drink, I'm going to drive home. Anyway, I got persuaded to drink by loads of people. And I'm one of those people that will drink and then not eat, so I'll get really drunk.
Eating's cheating, isn't it?
Eating's cheating. So there was but there were so many kids. There was a bouncy castle, there was music. All the kids were happy, they were playing. All the adults were drinking, and I drank a lot. And I didn't have any breakfast that day because I was going to eat at the barbecue, and then I didn't eat, and I blacked out. I was a nightmare, apparently, and they had to get a taxi for me and the boys. I don't remember this. Got home, and I woke up the next day with all my kids in my bed. We were all fully dressed, and I had a 40th birthday balloon around my wrist.
Wow.
Wow. And the kids were like, Mummy, I hated seeing you so drunk. And I've honestly never felt so much shame. And I think that was a tipping point for me. Because in my 20s, in my 30s, I used to drink and have awful hangovers, but I never felt that this is wrong. Do you know, I never felt like, oh, I need to stop there. I mean, obviously I did every now and then, but everyone else was doing it.
Yeah.
But I think since being a mother, I think when you become a parent or when you hit your 40s, you start to think, God, we're not young anymore. Like, what am I doing? Like, I've scared my children. I've embarrassed myself in front of all the school parents. And yeah. So,
But then, you know, and I'm not, you know, I'm not blaming them, but you had made a choice to drive there and not drink. And then, as I like to call it, you were booze bullied into it by people who wanted
well,
you
I
to join
was,
in their fun and make them
but
feel better
I'm
about their drinking.
I'm very easily persuaded. Well, I was back then. You know, like, yeah, they were like, just stay.
Yeah, but I mean, I get that, and I was the same. I mean, I would be the booze bully as well if someone had said they weren't drinking. I'd be like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" Blah blah blah. And I don't think many of my friends did ever say that they weren't drinking, but like it is a thing where if you go to a party, and I think people's attitudes are changing now, but if you go to a party and you say, "I'm not drinking," that should be the end of it. That really should. No one should ever question it because it's not like someone says, "Oh, do you want a cigarette?" And you say, "No, I don't smoke," or "No, thanks." They don't keep going, "Oh, go on, have." Do you know what I mean? It's not. It's still attitudes are changing, but I think people still think that because it's such a social norm and it's so normalized, they don't understand that people might be struggling, and the reason why they're not drinking tonight is because they got stuff to do the next day, or
Yeah.
they are finding it really tough to kind of kick the habit. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's the only drug, isn't it, that is used like that. You know, people will push you to drink and you will feel the odd one out when you're not drinking, which I found that quite hard over the last few months at my Christmas do. It was a free bar and everyone was like, "What? You're not drinking?" I was like, "No." And then they were like, "Why?" It's like,
Right. And
I'm
what did you say to them when they asked that?
I said, I'm not drinking because alcohol isn't good for me. I was
Good.
honest. Like I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were like, forever. I was like, well, I'm not sure, but I think so.
Yeah. And it is funny because I mean I now obviously tell people like no I'm sober, and like I'll say like 4.5 years or whatever, and that soon kind of goes like it doesn't shut them up, but they don't go, oh, and then they're interested, then they're like, oh, so was it an issue? And I obviously, as you know, I don't have a problem talking about it, so but people are like, oh, do you mind kind of is it okay to talk about it? And I'm like, yeah, of course it is, and I will talk about it. And
Yeah.
actually that does change their kind of you know opinion on I think the people that I've said that to would probably think twice now about asking someone if they're saying they don't drink.
Yeah.
I've never really come up against people that have said, oh, like I'll go on then, or have another one, but yeah, it's
I
an
don't think I
interesting
have
one.
either. I mean, apart from at the Christmas do, but your workmates aren't really your mates, are they? They're just sort of people that you work with. But my actual mates are so supportive. They know it's because of my mental health. They know how much I struggle with that, and they know how much good it's doing me. So they're fully supportive. If I go to a mate's house, they'll have a non-alcoholic drink for me. Like they're great. They're
That's
really good.
amazing because I mean, as I say, I noticed a few so-called friends that kind of dropped off the kind of radar after I got sober, and I was like, you know what, I'm fine with that because I did go into kind of a period of kind of hibernation. I just moved over to the Isle of Man and I got sober here, and I didn't really know anyone apart from my family, so it was okay to just almost vanish off the face of the earth. Like I deleted my Facebook and I set up my new
I think
Instagram.
that's a great thing to do for you. I think, you need to just sort of hibernate. You need to just get to know yourself again and just
Yeah,
heal and just get used to, being sober and stuff. It's really, it's a big change and
yeah.
you should do it how it works for you. Everyone's different, aren't they?
Exactly. So going back, so 2 years ago, did you get sober for a while then,
I
or
got sober for 85 days
right? Okay.
and then I went to see Noel Gallagher.
Oh, he's always a nightmare. If you go around his house, he's all sorry. You went to his gig,
Not
didn't
his
you?
house.
Yeah.
I went to see. Imagine, hi Noel, just
I know.
coming for a cuppa, Noel. Yeah, I went to his gig at Heaton Park in Manchester, and yeah, I got pretty drunk, but that sort of broke the spell. But I was moderating for a while. My problem now, being a mum and spending half the week on my own,
Yeah.
I am a home drinker. So when I don't have the lads, I'll go to Tesco's, I'll get a meal deal for one. Well, it's actually for two, but it's just for me.
Yeah.
And then you get a bottle of wine with it, don't you? So, and I'll smash that watching Netflix. And then I'll be like, oh, I want some more. So I'll just nip up to the shop, get another bottle of wine. Quite often I'll have half. Sometimes I'll have the full, but not always. So I'll be having like a bottle and a half of wine Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah. And that's Monday and Tuesday, isn't it? And it's funny you say that thing about the bottle of wine, because, and it's not okay to have a bottle of wine a night to yourself. That's a lot of alcohol. That's like, I think that's more than your weekly allowance at this point.
Yeah.
And then if you have that second bottle and it's like, well, I'll just have a glass out of it. How often does that just remain one glass? You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
You can't just have a glass from a bottle.
No.
So yeah, that's been my main sort of drinking the last, well, since I've been a single mum, like, well, a co-parent.
Yeah.
And then, like you, I love music. So if I do go out, it'll be to gigs. So yeah, I mean, I went to see Liam Gallagher in June. This is probably the last time I properly got pissed.
Yeah.
And I got wasted, and then we went to someone's hotel afterwards and did loads of coke. Didn't get in till 6 a.m. And then I woke up with COVID.
Oh.
I felt so bad.
And this was just 2024, the summer there, yeah.
Yeah. So that was the last time I properly got drunk. And then I woke up and I was like, you know, like when you're hungover and then the next day it's not going, and then the next day it's not going. I was like, 3 days into a hangover, what is going on? So I thought, I'm going to do a test because I'm feeling really crap.
Yeah.
And I got COVID.
That's, I mean, I blame Liam for that.
Honestly, I don't remember Liam. I don't remember anything. And I was so excited. I don't remember anything of the gig. Like, that's stupid.
See, that's the thing. I went to, this would have been 2022, and I went to London with my mate Rob, and we went to see Groove Armada down in Brixton Academy, and it was like supposedly Groove Armada's final gig live. They've done plenty since then, so I don't know what they were talking about. I feel a bit cheated, do you know what I mean? But I was like, yeah, this is their final gig, because they put on an extra date and we got to see the extra date. And it was an amazing night. All people like our age, a little bit older. And you could see there was people spangled off their tits and doing this and doing that. And it was like, it was a fun gig because there was no trouble. But I could see people in their 60s like that were clearly on stuff, and but having a good time. Anyway, we were quite close. Well, we were kind of middle, and you know, we were having a bit of a dance, and then Rob was like, "Oh," because I think I'd got a non-alcoholic beer, and he'd got a beer. So we're standing there in the middle of the kind of crowd with these plastic cups, you know, and then they came on, and I'd kind of finished mine, so I was like, "Good, get rid." So Rob was saying, "Well, I'm just going to go to the bar." And I was like, man, I do not miss that at all. So it was either going to the bar, spending like half an hour in the queue for the toilet to get in there to do a line or whatever. But then he said, he texted me halfway through and he said, do you want anything? I said, oh yeah, I'll have a bottle of water. So I thought I can just put that in my back pocket and sip it when I need it. Anyway, he said, oh, they'd run out of bottles of water. So he came back with a pint of water. Now, I had no need for a pint of water. I was hydrated. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, what am I going to do with this pint of water? I can't put it down. So I ended up downing it and then thinking I'm going to need to go to the loo. But it was just me reminding myself of the times when I've gone to gigs before. And most of the time I was spent at the bar, in the toilet, you know, trying to get whatever. Yeah.
And actually, you don't remember much of it. And I went to see the Lightning Seeds just before Christmas sober.
Oh, nice.
My first sober gig, and it was amazing. Like, it just felt great. And, you know, you just lose yourself in the music and really listen to it anyway. So.
Yeah. Well, we went to see Ocean Colour Scene on the Isle of Man last year, and it was a great gig. You know, I loved it. I love. We don't get many like big artists over here. We get a lot of what do you call it, like tribute acts. So I saw Guns or Roses a few years ago. They were all right, but they weren't Guns
I
N'
love
Roses.
tribute acts. Have you ever seen the bootleg Beatles?
Now they're one in their own. They're like amazing.
They are
yeah.
so good. I saw them with my mum actually, when she was alive, because my mum and dad love the Beatles, and I do as well, because I just grew up with them. But they're so good, aren't they? Like, they're so good.
I saw the bootleg Beatles in 1996 when we went to Loch Lomond to see Oasis. Now we had on that list, it was Cast, bootleg Beatles, Ocean Colour Scene, Black Grape, and then Oasis all in one day. And it was
That's
like
amazing.
we were.
Which was that? Where did you go there?
So that was 96. It was Loch Lomond.
96. So I was at the first Nebworth.
So that was the, I think ours was the weekend before Nebworth. So ours was, it was a record breaking thing for Scotland, but then Nebworth just was completely like,
that was the first gig. That was my first gig. I went with my mate, and I was 14, going to turn 15. We went with a disposable camera, and I went with 20 B&H. And it was absolutely fucking incredible. Nothing's ever beat it since then.
No, I mean that was the heyday, and it was like these times when we'd gone up on a bus from Glasgow, a bunch of us, and then like later on in the day, like we were drinking. I think we just took in like a crate of beer, or we were drinking in the park beforehand, and then went in, and obviously we were smoking, and then one of our friends was like, "Oh, we're gonna stay. Some of our friends have got a tent, and we're gonna just stay the night or whatever." So we were like, "Oh yeah, we'll do," because we just didn't want the party to end. Oh my God, it was the coldest night I've ever spent. Okay, it was like June in Scotland, but it was still Loch Lomond, and we didn't have a tent, we didn't have a sleeping bag, so it was just absolutely horrendous.
That is a story, isn't it? Like, that's a good story. That's amazing.
The things that we do. So what was the kind of turning point this time, like 145 days ago? So would that have been after the Liam gig then?
So I have been sober curious for 2 years.
Yeah.
Done stints, quite a few stints. So I started to follow loads of sober people, i.e. you. I don't know if you know Sober Bo, Chris Sober Bo.
The name rings a bell.
Yes, he used to head up the Midlands Sobriety, the Sober Society.
Right.
We've become really good friends, actually. He's amazing. I think he's 2 years clean, but he is just, when you meet someone and they're just wise and amazing and just, he's such a cool guy. So I connected with him. And then I asked on Instagram one day, I had a spare James ticket. I was going to go see James. And I said, my mates couldn't come. So I put a shout out on Instagram. Does anyone want to go to James? And he came with me and we met. This was back in May, I think. And when you just meet someone and you're like, yeah, like, I feel like I know you.
Yeah, yeah. And he was obviously sober as well, so
I was drinking.
Right.
He drove. I was like, yes, I didn't have to get a taxi, because I live in Whaley Bridge, which is like the Peak District. So it's really far from Manchester. Well, it's not far, but it's a mission.
Well, I used to live in Hope.
Yes, we chatted about this. So that pub, oh my God, that pub.
Oh yeah, that pub. Anyway, sorry, you tell your bit first.
So we went to James and we just got on, and we've become really close. He's brilliant. He's almost like a sponsor. Does that make sense? I'm not in NA, but I see him as a wise owl, and I've helped him out through some hard times, and he's helped me. So sorry, I waffle a lot.
No, this is all good stuff. No, carry on.
So I got sober on my birthday, the 1st of September last year.
Nice.
And me and him, so I'm a hiker. I love hiking. So that's been my therapy since I left my marriage, really. I just go out on the hills and just hike.
It's so good, yeah.
It's so good, isn't it? So me and him had arranged for a hike just near Buxton. Mm-hmm. And we were going to get a pub lunch afterwards. Anyway, so we started hiking, and there was fucking loads of cows, and I hate cows. I hate them. So I was like, right, we can't go this way.
Yeah.
I was like, let's just sod the hike. We'll just go to the pub. So we went to the pub, got some food, and we were just chatting, and he was just talking about his journey, and I thought, do you know what? I'm gonna fucking stop drinking today. And I did. I stopped on my birthday.
So you were having a drink with your meal, and then you thought, no, that's it. I'm not having any more.
Yeah.
And that was 145 days ago.
Yeah, there was no rock bottom, but there's been many rock bottoms.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be. There doesn't always have to be a rock bottom, you know.
Yeah.
It's
but
just
I have had many rock bottoms over the last whenever, like, yeah, you know, I've had many. So
yeah,
I wasn't at rock bottom at that point, but I guess, like you said, you don't have to be, do you?
You don't have to be. I did. I had many, and they kept on getting worse. But you know, it wasn't after each one. It wasn't the rock bottom or the worst rock bottom that made me stop. It just suddenly clicked for me, and I was like, I've got to do this, or I'm never going to do it. You know,
Yeah.
and it was like, I think in the past when I'd quit, and I was like counting my days and all that, but in somewhere in the back of my mind, like I wasn't ready, or I wasn't really believing myself that I was going to do it. And then this one last time, I was like, no, I'm done. And after 3 months, I got a tattoo with the date on it, you know, of my sobriety date.
That's so cool.
And
That's
people were like, was that not a bit early? And I was like, well, it's on my wrist, so if I need to score it out, I've got plenty of space down my arm to put a new date. I was joking, of course, because I was like, I'm not going to get this scrubbed out. I just knew, you know, I just knew at that point that all the stars had aligned, and that this was now my time to kind of to do it.
It's like a switch, isn't it? It's like, you know, I think the difference this time is I've educated myself. I think podcasts are my saviors. You know, Sober Dave.
Yeah, legend.
Who else? Sober Rebel. I love her. There's loads that I listen to. They think it's all sober. I love those two guys. I listen to hours per day because I work from home. So hearing other people's stories and struggles and trauma, and it's something so magical in that. And you relate to stuff, and you think, oh yeah, I did that. And you start to see what alcohol is. You know, it's a poison. And well,
they say in the fellowship, you know, and I was, for my first year, I was really steeped in the fellowship. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. I did SMART, I did AA, I did CA. You know, I just did everything that was kind of available to me, and that was great for the first year. And the thing with you know, the fellowship is they kind of say, you know, if you don't go to a meeting, you're gonna fail and all that. And it's not all the time. They don't always say that, but there was that kind of mentality, and I was like, well, what if I can't get a meeting? You know, I don't want to be relying on that. I want to be relying on myself and my own ability to stop drinking. So you know, I'll still pop into me. I still go to SMART every now and then, which is part of
Motivate. It's always there, isn't it? So
always there.
My parents drifted away every now and then from the fellowship, and then go back. I mean, my mum became she became an alcoholic the last few years of her life, and she did pass away an alcoholic. So that's pretty upsetting. But so she didn't stay clean forever. I mean, my dad also did drink a little bit, but he hasn't for a number of years now.
Yeah. And I think it's, you know, some people can kind of, you know, replace one addiction with another, and
definitely, my dad was a work addict once he gave up booze.
I mean, live in a society where there's so much abundance of everything. You know, we can have everything on tap at the click of a button. I mean, I don't live in the UK anymore, and we don't have Uber Eats over here, so that seemed to just come in after I left, because I don't know what my situation would have been like if I could have just phoned up or gone on my phone and an app and said, right, I want a bottle of wine. Do you know what I mean? And it delivered to your door at any time of night. That's like, and plus that was around COVID time. So I was going to ask you, like, how was your kind of drinking habits over COVID? What was COVID like for you? Were you just there with your kids, or were you
Yeah,
still
so
co-parenting?
awful, to be honest, because I'd left my marriage in 2019. I'm not going to talk too much about my marriage.
No,
It
that's
was
fine. Yeah.
very unhappy, very controlling, and I had to leave in the end. And we've actually got into a good place, me and my ex now. Like, we can co-parent 90% of the time, okay? So you have to let shit go, don't you, sometimes? So I
Yeah.
let it all go. Otherwise it eats you up, doesn't it? But yeah, so I'd left my marriage 2019, moved from Stockport from the family home. So we sold the family home.
Mm-hmm.
He moved to Disley, which is in well, it's in Cheshire actually, but it's just on the edge of the peaks. And I moved to Whaley Bridge, which is about 5 minutes up the road.
Mm-hmm.
So the boys moved school, we moved house. I was pretty much having a mental breakdown at that time. And yeah, it was really tricky. And then obviously COVID hit, and I was working and I was trying to parent 3 boys, and it was really hard.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I drank every day
Yeah.
in COVID.
And were you working,
Yeah,
but working on Zoom and things, or just working from
so
home?
I work in finance. I work in accounts payable, so I worked from home. Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing was with COVID, and I used to see memes every now and then. And actually, do you know what? I did a bit of. I was in rehab when everyone went into the first lockdown. I was in a detox facility in Blackpool, and so when I came out of there and I was on my own in my own flat, because I'd broken up with my ex, and I was couldn't get over here to my parents. The friend that I'd been staying with had kind of cut me off, and so I was in this place on my own with no one to basically say you shouldn't be drinking or whatever. So I was just free to my own device. It was a beautiful summer, but I remember doing one of the catch up weekly catch ups that we did with this rehab facility, telling everyone that I was sober, and I was doing this, pretending I had a cup of tea, but it was full of vodka, and I thought I was being so smart. But I've seen since, like, people memes saying, how to get away with drinking on your work meeting and all that, and it was like, put a little tea bag label to come out of your cup, and it was like, it's so irresponsible, because there was a lot of people that were drinking during the day when they went
Yeah.
back to work.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't drink. I sort of probably started about 4 p.m. Like when the kids were just winding me up, and I
Yeah.
finished work, and I was like, I was gonna, and it was really hot, wasn't it? Like
It
you
was
said,
an
it was
amazing summer. Yeah,
like,
yeah. It was
it
like,
was great, and the kids were just running around naked,
yeah, everyone
and
was feral.
I wasn't. But it was hot, and and the kids were feral, and yeah, it was a happy time in a way, but not. Yeah, it was a funny time, wasn't it? It was
It,
such a weird time.
it was a very, very weird time. And I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how I would have coped had I mean, I came over here and our lockdown restrictions had kind of been mostly lifted by the time I got here because they hadn't had a case for about 100 days. And then they opened the borders and people were starting to come in without exemptions and things. And then we got it again. So when
Yeah.
we went back into like kind of lockdowns and things, it was okay for me because I wasn't drinking. But how I would have coped had I been drinking, having to be able to go to the shops and get as much as I needed, because I used to kid myself. I would go and get when I lived in Hull, I would go and, like, if I wasn't working, because I was between jobs at that point, I would do a job and then I would quit it because it was crap and I basically wanted to drink. And I would go up to the petrol station in the morning once, my ex and her kids had gone to school and work, and I'd be shaking and I'd literally go up to the garage and I'd buy like just a half bottle of vodka because I was thought, right, this is all I'm gonna have today just to stop the shakes and all that, and then I'm gonna get myself sorted out. And it was the same every day. Why I didn't just go and buy a bottle, because I'd be up there by lunchtime again getting another half, and it was just relentless. But I was always kidding myself, and maybe I thought, I don't want the people behind the counter to think that I'm drinking a full bottle of vodka. I'm just having, like, they care. Do you know what I mean? They didn't really give two hoots about it.
That's so funny, actually. You've just reminded me. So my mum, when she was I think she was drinking. She started drinking 2000. Oh, I can't remember. But the last few years of her life, she was drinking vodka.
Right.
Like, and Mum and Dad lived in a cottage in Hertfordshire, and they had an alley. So at the end of the garden, it was like a cottage garden. There was an alleyway behind the fence, and behind the alleyway was like there's a pub basically, and there was like a no man's land between the pub and the alleyway. Dad one day, I don't know why he did this, but he looked over the side and there was about 30 empty vodka bottles.
Wow.
That Mum
had just been lobbing over the fence.
And then she used to, so I lived so I came to uni in Manchester in 2005. So I've lived up here for years. Mama used to come up when, she used to come up and visit me and the kids. And there'd be a bottle of vodka in a suitcase, which I'd always find. Yeah.
Well, I used to put mine down the stem of the sink in the bathroom. I think I put them in the cistern. I also hid them in, because sometimes I was like, I can't keep going to the toilet, and then I was thought, right, I'll put them in the kitchen. Where can I put them in the kitchen that's easy accessible? I know there was a box of bran flakes. Now the kids never touched the bran flakes. They were always like Cheerios or Ricicles or whatever. So I just thought I'll just put it in the bran flakes. So it was just there, easy accessible. And I'm no way trying to give people tips on where to hide booze, but
it's true though, isn't it? Like you do these crafty little sneaky things.
Yeah. Well, we think we're being crafty. I mean, I thought I was getting away with it, but as I say, my ex knew all the time. Like she knew, and it would all just end up coming out, and we'd have these massive big arguments, and then I'd be like, I'll get better, I'll get sober. And then I would stop for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd stop looking grey, and I'd kind of feel a bit healthier, and then I'd go and start running again. And then as soon as I started feeling better again, I'd be like, oh well, this hasn't killed me. I'll just have a little drink tonight, and then
right.
Yeah, and then it goes straight back to it. So it's so going back to that, would you go back and change? Would you like if you go back to your 14-year-old self and say you shouldn't ever drink?
No, because like you were saying before, those times were fun. Not always, but they were the times of our lives. Like they were, weren't they? They were fun, and I had great fun. I worked in Ibiza for a summer, and I went clubbing, I went to gigs, I went to festivals. It was great.
It's experimentation, isn't it, as well? And we're young, and we're trying to find out who we are, and
No, I don't think I'd change anything.
No,
which sounds a bit weird, but
no, I mean I get you, because I'm exactly the same. I mean, what are your kind of thoughts on? And are you okay for time? Is your energy okay?
No, I don't have the kids tonight.
Okay.
So I've got Netflix later. So
cool. So what are your, for me, and I know you've listened to a few of the podcasts already. For me, I've started to hate everything about alcohol. I mean, I did, as we say, enjoy my times back in the day, but now I'm starting to see it as a bit of it's a bit of an evil poison that shouldn't really be about. And as it is a very, controversial kind of opinion. But I just wanted to kind of get, my guests' kind of opinions on it. What your thoughts on alcohol are now.
I can't imagine ever having it again, like waking up with that anxiety and that dread of, oh God, what have I done? Having to ring around your friends. What did I do?
Yeah.
Oh, there was drama last night, Kate. Oh no, what did I do?
And I think once you get past the 90 days, that is when it really starts. Like the magic starts happening, and you start noticing, you'll get maybe a little flash of a thing come in your head and go, oh yeah, I could really fancy a drink because it's a summer and it's this and it's that. Because we associate these moments in time with, and I remember living here, and it was this beautiful sunset, and I looked out my front door, and it was on the hills, and I was like, oh my God. And I thought, could really have a beer or a glass of wine. And then I was like, but how would that make this beautiful moment better? If anything, it would dull it. Do you know what I mean? Because you're having the wine or the beer, and for me, it would then be like 3, 4, 5, 6, so it would ruin the night. But even just having that one, like I can enjoy that experience without it. In fact, it's better without it. But we have this association now.
Is yeah. I was listening to a podcast recently, the Sober Rebel, and she explained it really beautifully. She said that she gets lots of glimmers, which are the opposite of triggers. And you know, when you just feel so grateful and full of gratitude and love and happy, it's like you're just so happy you want to burst.
Yeah.
Calls them glimmers, and I just thought that was so lovely. And
I love that. Yeah.
So many glimmers now. Like, yeah, I still obviously do get triggered sometimes. You know, I've got ADHD, which I found out quite recently. But those glimmers are absolutely amazing.
I love the word, and I love the kind of association, because, you know, triggers does obviously have that nasty connotation, but, you know, glimmers kind of reminds me a bit of the pink cloud. I don't know if you kind of felt that in your early days of sobriety. You might even still be experiencing the pink cloud, and, you know, that people always say, oh, you know, it doesn't last long and it wears off. Do you know what? I'm like 4.5 years nearly, and I still feel like I'm in the pink cloud, just because my life is so much better now than what it was before. You know, I changed my complete career, because I think a lot of my drinking was to do with being unfulfilled in my jobs. You know, I would do temping jobs, and I would kind of then get taken on permanent, and they would go, oh, you know, if you stick in here, you can make a career of this. And I was like, do I want to? What is this place that I'm working for? Is it? I worked in a modular construction place, and then I've worked in finance. I've worked for internet companies. I've worked for IT companies in Sheffield. So the list is, my CV's endless. But since getting sober, a friend of mine over here was like, well, while you're still looking for work, he said, I need some work done in my garden. And then eventually he said, like, you're actually quite good at this. And I was like, well, I've always been interested in growing plants and things, growing veg, stuff I can eat. And he was like, why don't you set yourself up as a gardener? I was like, what do you mean? He goes, just set up a Facebook page. So it kind of just went from there to there, and strength to strength. And like, you know, that would have been, yeah. So that was just in my first 6 months. So like 4 years ago. And, you know, I love it, because I'm working for myself. I can do what I want.
And you're with nature, and yeah, it is a great job, isn't it, gardening?
Yeah. And I remember thinking in the first year or so, I was like, oh, this would have been the best job for me when I was drinking, because no boss would have been bothering me to you know. And then I was like thinking, I played the tape forward, and I was like, yeah, but you'd have to drive home, plus you're working with heavy machinery. Your customer would smell the booze on you, and you'd do a crap job, so they wouldn't get you back. So no, it's not the best job. And it was like, but I played the tape forward, and it was like, you know, I kind of discussed it with myself and was like, no, it wouldn't have been the best job. But do you know what? I know I'm not trying to make this about me, but I've never regretted getting sober one bit. You know, I have a beautiful fiance. I'm, you know, nearly going to be stepfather to three amazing kids. You know, I've got two cats of my own. They've got a cat. We want to get a dog when we all move in together. What's that?
Your house looks beautiful.
Well, this is a little thatched cottage that I found through a friend after about 6 months of being sober, and I just loved it. And I took it sight unseen, and it's tiny, but it's just perfect for me. And it was perfect for me in the first, you know, the first 3, 4 years of getting sober. And I absolutely love it. I will be sad to move out of here, but it's, you know, it's time to move on to the kind of next stage.
Definitely, but it's giving you that safe space, isn't it?
Oh,
just
without a doubt.
And yeah, I find that with this house actually. So I moved here after I left my husband, and it's been such a safe place for us. Like, it's amazing.
Good. And so where do you see, I mean, I know you said you can't see yourself drinking again. What do you kind of want to happen in the kind of coming year?
Next steps. Well, I think because I haven't been drinking, I've kind of been sat with my authentic self, which is great. It's great, isn't it? But on the other hand, it's really hard, isn't it, to sit with those hard feelings. Yeah. Obviously, I've been feelings for years. So I think my next step is inner child work. That's what I want to do.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, look at the inner child and look at past trauma, maybe some psychotherapy.
Cool. That sounds amazing. And obviously, how are you with the kind of socializing, the going to gigs, events? Have you done? You said you'd done one sober gig.
It's weird. Since getting sober, I've realised I can be an extrovert, but I'm also an introvert as well. Like, I love being at home. I love being in my own company, but I do like people as well. But yeah, socially I'm fine because I'm quite chatty. I'm quite outgoing. So yeah, I mean, the Christmas party was a little bit awkward with my work colleagues because they were all pissed.
Yeah.
But my mates don't really get pissed, really, really pissed. You know, they're not big drinking friends. We all love hiking. We all love getting outdoors. We all love, you know, like we're all quite spiritual and stuff. So yeah.
That's cool. And that's good that they're your close friends. So, you know, the things where you go to like your Christmas do, when people start repeating themselves and telling you the same story 3 or 4 times, for me, it's time to go. And I can because I've got my car outside, you know, I just jump in the truck and I'm off. And that's it.
That's what I did. And then I heard that there was people crying, people saying, I hate
Well, because you'd left.
No, because they were pissed and they were crying. They were like, I hate my job, to the manager. I was like, oh my God, that's the sort of thing I would have done.
Yeah. And then they've got to go back in on Monday and it's like, why do you hate your job? And why do you know what I mean? Christmas parties were always the worst. We did one in Hull for that modular construction company. So we started off at the office, then we went to the local, and then we ended up in Hull itself for I think they called it Black Eye Friday. And that name in itself just annoys me. It's like, why, you know, and it's obviously, you know, the police that have probably coined it that because that's the amount of fights that go on that night. But it was just a horrendous night. And I think, you know, I think I got home way later than I was supposed to, and who knows what had happened. But yeah, I'm so glad that I don't have to wake up and look at my phone and go, oh my God.
Yeah, and just hear all the stories about what, you know.
Why have I got 17 missed calls?
Yeah. And I find as well, like, you just have so much time now.
Yeah.
You have time, and, you know, I don't know. I mean, I wake up early. I've always been a sort of early bird, really. But now I wake up really early. In fact, me and my friend Chris, we message each other and like, I've woken up first. No, I did. Like, because he wakes up super early as well.
This is Chris Soberbo, is it? Yeah.
He wakes up early. Yeah, so I go to sleep so early now, and it's just lovely. And then I wake up.
That's the thing. I think when we're younger, it's like who can stay up latest? Do you know what I mean? When you know that because you've got a bedtime, and then when you're allowed to stay up a bit later, and then when you've got your own place and you're out with your friends, it's like, well, I stayed up for like 4 days. Do you know what I mean? And it's like this badge of honor to stay up. Now I'm not bothered. I'm like, you know what? If I'm up past midnight on a weeknight, because I wake up at 6, so I'm like shattered the next day, you know. So I'm happy to like watch a film, poodle about, and then in bed by 10, 11. So it's the best way to be.
It really is. And I think like you have more freedom. So, you know, when you were like drinking and you'd be like, right, well, I'm going to be hungover that day. That's going to ruin this.
Yeah.
And you're always planning, aren't you? Like, drink comes first. You're like planning things around the drink. Whereas now it's just so much freedom. It's like, I don't drink, so I can drive to the lakes when I don't have the boys and camp. I mean, obviously not now because it's really windy, but
it is pretty windy. But I used to we'd go and have like a day out, and I would be thinking, where should we go for lunch? And where we went for lunch would never just be a little cafe. It would have to be a pub lunch, because if we went to a cafe, I'd only get a tea or a coffee, and I didn't want that. I wanted to get a pint in, you know, and that's where it's
and now you're just free. You're free of all that and all the anxiety around it, you know, because you're probably like, when you wanted to go to the pub and someone suggested a cafe, you were probably like anxious, like, no, we're going to the pub.
I mean, a lot of times I'd have probably been drinking the night before, so I was just getting through the whole
Yeah.
point of whatever activity we were doing that day until it was lunchtime or dinner time, and then I was like looking forward to that pint. But if someone tried to take that away from me, oh, you know, the anxiety would get up, and I would probably go in a bit of a mood. But yeah, it's just nice to not have to have that kind of stress about thinking about where's the next drink coming from, or you know, you know, I'm not saying you were as bad as that, but I think any level of it, once you've got rid of that kind of, you know, like kind of pull on you,
Yeah.
you're just free.
I
Um,
know.
yeah,
And I even really don't. I mean, I probably drank every weekend from my teens right up until my early 40s. Like, there was times, I mean, there was probably times when I didn't drink, but I was a regular drinker, you know. So most Mondays I was feeling shit, you know,
yeah,
and then I was into Tuesday, and then Wednesday is hump day, and then you're thinking about Friday, aren't you?
yeah,
You can drink. So your whole life is governed and ruled by alcohol,
yeah,
because you're planning when you can next drink, you're getting over it because you drank really heavy at weekend, so you're either getting over it and then you start thinking about it again. So
yeah.
it's a vicious cycle, like,
It
and
really
it's
is, and
step off it and just be free and not, yeah, it's so lovely. Like, I recommend it to anyone.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a great place to kind of to end it today, Kate. Then, yeah, you
Aww.
recommend it to anyone? I mean, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of insight into, you know, the early days of recovery, because I think sometimes it can be quite. I remember when I was in my early days, and I'm still early days. Let's be honest, I'm still only 4.5 years. There's people that I know like with 20 years or 30 years. So but you know, you're right back at the beginning, like in that first year. And I remember looking at Insta accounts where it was like people with like 5 years or 6 years, and I just thought, oh my God, that's so unattainable, you know. But like when people hear a story of someone that's got 145 days, and looking at you, you know, you're fresh, you're happy, you're you know, you're full of life, and they might only be on a week, or they might not even be sober yet. So if they can, you know, see that and hear about it, then you know, I think it's just all about kind of banging this drum and um helping people out, you know, and that's it. Because coming
Yeah.
from someone that's like, when I was first days, I never wanted to speak to like a support worker or helper that hadn't been through it. You know, I think the whole peer experience is the way forward with kind of addiction and alcoholism. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, I'd love to help families with addiction because I went through it, and we've
Yeah.
had a lot of support from social workers and, like outside, like charities and stuff. So yeah, I mean, if I could change my job, that's what I'd like to do, but maybe one day.
Yeah, well, you know, there's still plenty of time, and you know, with all this extra time that we have now we're sober, we can do it. So this will be going out Monday. And do you want me to put your kind of like Insta account on there, or are you wanting to keep that
Instagram's
private?
fine. It's private, but if
If
someone wants
someone
to,
adds you, then yeah, you can obviously vet that, and then, but I don't need to put it on if you don't want me to.
that's
Um,
fine. Put it on. I am sober in the peaks.
Sober in the Peaks, that's it. So I'll add that at the bottom of it. As I say, Monday, you know, I have recorded this. I do have a YouTube channel where I used to do kind of just piece the camera. So I might start putting these out on the channel, but I'm not 100% on that yet. Everybody seems to be doing that now. Like, they seem to be putting the videos out. Like, I just listen to podcasts when I'm at work because I can crack on with my work. It's in my ear. I think if I've then got to watch something, I've got to find time to sit in front of a screen to do that, you know, and I don't know. So I don't know if I want to do that yet, but as I say, it's there, and we might do that further down the line. But thank you so much for today, Kate. It's been amazing speaking to you. And you know, I know, as I say, we've known each other on the Insta for a couple of years, but it's lovely to finally meet you in person.
Well, thanks, Jimmy, and it's really nice to meet you, and it's great you're doing this. So yeah, well done,
Thank
and
you.
proud of
Appreciate it.
yourself.
Well, you take care, and I will see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Yeah, so that was Kate. Really interesting conversation we had, and I hope that you guys, took a lot from it. It's just really interesting to have chats with people that are, early days of recovery, but also that they've not had the same, kind of dependency as I had, waking up in the morning and all I could see or think to do was to drink vodka. So, for Kate and other people out there, it's interesting to note that it can still be an issue in your life. It can still have a negative impact if you're only doing it at weekends or, having the odd bottle and then slipping into the second bottle of an evening on a Tuesday night. You don't have to be drinking every single day and need a medical detox for it to be an issue in your life. So, I hope everyone's kind of taking a lot from that. If you do and you think that someone is kind of struggling in a similar way, then please share it, forward it on to them. And yeah, as I always say, hit the 5-star review button. Leave me comments if you want to see more of a certain thing or hear more of another thing. Then definitely leave those reviews and follow my pages. And I'm on at recovery_Jimmy on Instagram. And I'll put Kate's in the show notes as well. But thanks for listening. Have a great week, guys, and see you next week.